For 25 years, Mike's has been making lemonade the hard way. Mike's Hard Lemonade. Hard days deserve a hard lemonade. Mike's is hard, so is prison. Don't drive drunk. Premium malt beverage with flavors. All registered trademarks used under license by Mike's Hard Lemonade Company, Chicago, Illinois.
Robert Pickton, one of the worst serial killers.
A new true crime series from Freeform.
A lot of victims are people who are in the margins.
When all else fails,
there's possibly many more victims.
Nobody cared.
Sasha Reed and her team take the case.
We're coming for you.
I just want answers. We're going to do absolutely everything to get closure to these cases.
The whole thing is a cover-up.
There's so much more here.
Sasha Reed and the Midnight Order premieres July 9th on Freeform and stream on Hulu.
We're coming for you.
You can support this podcast at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And on this episode, a man is ambushed on country music's most famous boulevard. Was he killed because he wanted to clean up the industry? We'll talk about the podcast Murder on Music Row from the Tennessean. Joining me to get that done and more is true crime author, TV journalist, and host of These Are Their Stories podcast, my husband and love of my life, Kevin Flynn. Hi, Kevin.
Hello, Rebecca. And a reminder, I'm actually doing that podcast again. It returns on Wednesday. These Are Their Stories, the Law & Order podcast. New episodes return.
Oh, who's our first guest for the premiere episode of the new season?
Our first guest is Roberta Blevins from the Life After MLM podcast.
Oh, she's so funny, and she smells so good.
It's the perfect podcast for smelling. I know. Meantime, Toby's like, what do I smell like? You know?
She smells like black opium YSL perfume, which is why I wear it now, because I met her at an event and we got along really well. And she taught me a trick, which is to get the sample bottles, which I did. And then I was just like, fuck it, I'm buying the big one. But she's the best. She's so nice and so funny and so lovely. She was in the LuLaRoe documentary as a former LuLaRoe person who then was like one of the talking heads in the documentary. And now she does a podcast about MLMs, and she's got a huge TikTok following. She's hilarious. I love her. Also with us is private investigator, certified pet detective, resident cat lady, and author of The Final Curtain, Laura Bricker. Hi, Laura.
Hey, Rebecca. I'm not into MLMs, but I still aspire to join a cult someday.
Why? Who doesn't?
By the way, Laura, nobody thinks they're joining a cult. Just FYI.
But I'm going to do research before I join a cult.
All right. And finally, our captain of all things cynical, author of the City Trilogy of novels, host of Strange Arrivals, and our Patreon Deep Dive Book Club podcast host, Toby Ball. Hi, Toby.
Hi, Rebecca.
Toby, I can't help but notice you're surrounded by wood paneling. What is going on?
It's not wood paneling. It's just wood.
It's actual wood.
I'm sorry. That's beadboard above you. And beadboard around you, my friend. That counts.
I always think of wood paneling as being like fake wood that somebody put up in their basement.
Yeah.
This is all American, just wood.
Wood.
I'm up. It's sort of an annual tradition where I record from one of the bedrooms in my family's summer place up on Lake Winnipesaukee.
Yeah. And then at some point, we're going to hear some laughter from another
Fireworks.
room or outside.
There's going to be laughter. Yeah. There might be some boats going by.
One year there was like heavy fireworks, if I recall correctly.
That one year, my buddy who lives like 5 houses down bought like $500 worth of fireworks the day after July 4th. And then set them off for like 45 consecutive minutes while we were trying to record.
Laura, I have to tell you something real quick that I'm not trying to change your mind about being a cat person.
Okay.
But my colleague, one of my favorite people, she was bitten by her parents' cat last week and almost lost her hand.
Oh, wow.
What?
Do you know that getting a cat bite is the most serious kind of bite you can get?
Yeah,
Sharks beg to differ, but continue.
She not only had to go to the emergency room and a hand surgeon, but she had to go to the doctor like a lot more than that, and then had to get her hand debraded and then had to debrade her own hand every single day while taking the world's strongest antibiotics. And she went to the hand surgeon and he told her that he's had to do several hand amputations.
Hand amputations?
Because of cat bites.
Well, I'm not getting rid of my cat.
No, I'm not saying get rid of your cat. I'm just saying Be careful. And if you ever get bitten by a cat, especially in the hand or the face, go immediately to the emergency room. Do not press go. Do not try to wash it. Do not try to treat it yourself.
Oh.
She said, and I quote, "I have been told my pain isn't real by so many doctors."
Oh, no, this is just like the fertility podcast in women and their IUDs.
And by the way, Hannah has lots of health issues, and she does have a lot of real pain. She's like, this is the first time every single provider I have ever seen has said, holy fucking shit, we need to get you in immediately.
You know, this is good information because like my cats don't bite me, but my fat cat did try to bite Lance the other day. So we don't want Lance to have his hand amputated.
No.
I mean, it might add some cred at the next Ren Fair, but
then call him the hook.
It might be problematic in other areas.
That's right. That's right. All right. Well, that's our PSA for today. Your cat bites you in the hand. Run. Do not walk.
Run. Do not walk to your closest ER.
That's right. All right. Well, on that note, this is obviously Monday's podcast.
It's a Monday and it's a brand new episode in the summer for Crime Writers On.
What's coming up on next week's show?
Well, just to let you know that on Thursday, we've got a great CWO Classic Rewind. We're going to go back to our review of the original season of Mindhunter.
Yay!
Ooh. And then on Monday, we're going to be talking about the podcast series from Pushkin Industries. It's Deep Cover, The Nameless Man.
And Mindhunter, of course, stars Tony winner Jonathan
Adam Groff.
Adam Groff?
It's Jonathan Groff.
Jonathan Groff. I'm sorry. Jonathan Groff from Hamilton.
Yes. Yes.
Or as he's known, the Groff sauce,
Yes.
apparently.
The Groff sauce.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. All right. Well, let's get into what we're talking about. What do you think?
Let's do that.
All right. Let's go ahead and drop that first clip right now. Leading off.
It's a song about the lethal influence of money, greed, and the lust for fame. I'm convinced, after all my research, Kevin Hughes tried to operate in his little sliver of the music business by steering clear of all those things. He tried to show integrity, and it got him killed.
In 1989, 23-year-old Kevin Hughes was killed when he was ambushed by a gunman along Nashville's famous Music Row. Hughes had been troubled that the country music record chart he worked for was accepting money under the table to manipulate the rankings of up-and-coming artists.
He would do a chart would come out of the magazine, be completely different than what he would put in his chart sample. So by the time that he would do a chart, it would go to press, it was manipulated or changed.
Did he know who was doing that?
He did not know.
Hughes's opposition to the dirty practice put him in the crosshairs of powerful independent music promoters who paid for chart positions to milk money from their unsuspecting clients. Detectives wondered if Hughes was executed because he didn't want to play ball, and whether someone lured him into a deadly trap to get back on the chart with a bullet.
You think he's just sitting there waiting, hoping that Kevin's there? Why does Kevin need to be there? There's no reason for him to be there. I could see Sammy being there, but not Kevin. What's the odds that somebody knew that he was going to be there?
In the podcast Murder on Music Row from the Tennessean, host Keith Sharon explores who benefited from Hughes's killing, challenges the claim of the passenger in the car, and looks at the unscrupulous actions of promoters who prey on those dreaming of stardom. Sharon also tells the tale of the hit country music song Murder on Music Row and how it does and does not fit in with the case. We are going to be talking about significant and spoilery plot points from Murder on Music Row, so if you want to remain spoiler-free, go to the estimated time code in our show notes for our thumbs up or thumbs down reviews. Now, Laura, you have a note that this podcast reminds you of one of your favorite television shows.
It does. I don't know if y'all remember that show, City Confidential.
Yeah.
Where the guy with that deep, gravelly voice, they would always profile a crime in a certain city, but they would also profile the city and the area it happened, like a character in itself. He'd be like, and now we're in Exeter, and he had that great voice. And I think in this particular podcast, it really goes together with that because I don't think you can really separate the murder of Kevin Hughes from Nashville because his murder and everything behind his murder is so entwined in Nashville and the country music scene. And, he's working for this like fake one-off magazine that's ranking songs. But Nashville in itself is such a character here as they're referencing all of these up and coming at that time breakout country music stars. This is like Garth Brooks is just like got his first hit, and Faith Hill is a witness to this and runs out, and Willie Nelson is recording down the street. So hearing kind of what was going on behind the scenes in Nashville, I think was so important to this story because it was really almost as important as the investigation itself because it had to become such a part of the investigation. But I mean, if Kevin could do the City Confidential voice for this.
I don't know if I can.
Nashville, we once went there for a podcast event and Toby ate hot chicken. Remember that, Toby?
I do.
And Rabia rode a scooter.
That's right. That's right. Toby, what did you think about the sense of place in the podcast and how it fits into the storytelling?
Yeah, I think like a lot of really good podcasts that we've covered, Keith uses, this murder as both sort of looking at the murder, but also taking a look at the environment in which it takes place. And this is kind of what Laura was talking about, which is it feels like kind of a transitional moment in country music where you're going from sort of old country music to the country music of the 90s up through now. He does a really good job of like both kind of giving you the sense of this transition that's about to take place, but also kind of what goes on away from like the brightest lights of Nashville, because a lot of this takes place with the people who are like not the stars, but like a couple steps down. And one of the things I thought was really interesting is sort of, the seedier side of Nashville, these independent labels and promoters who are really like their business is to fleece these kids who come into town with like stars in their eyes wanting to be country music stars, and they just take their money and send them on their way. I thought that was really interesting, and I think Keith's voice was so good in that it really seemed to reflect the other voices we hear in the story and that story, and I thought that writing also kind of contributed to this overall feel that you get of Nashville in the mid to late 80s.
Music Row isn't flashy in any way. It's as plain as a pawn shop acoustic guitar. A lot of people who come to Nashville think Music Row is the neon-drenched string of rip-roaring bars on Lower Broadway. They would be wrong, and they might be drunk. Lower Broadway is as loud as an electric guitar with a Fender Tonemaster Deluxe Reverb amp.
I'll tell you that Nashville as a character reminded me there was a short-lived television show. I know it wasn't as short-lived as I thought it was because I just stopped watching it because it had Connie Britton in it and then it didn't, called Nashville. And it was really fun when it started because it was sort of Nashville itself was a character in the show. And it had like Connie Britton and a couple of other people who were sort of representative of people like Trisha Yearwood at the top of their career. But then it also had characters who were like playing at the Bluebird Cafe, and it showed like those intersections of like non-famous and famous people and how sometimes those people really do interact, like the songwriters and the stars. And I know that was a very fictionalized version. I'm sure people who live in Nashville fucking hated it. But like the podcast, I think, did a really good job of just peeling back the industry. It's such a small town industry in a way that like Hollywood is a big town, small town industry. Like Nashville is a small town industry. So Kevin, what did you think about like just the sort of like structure, the news gathering part of the podcast?
Well, I liked it. I wanted to jump on what Toby said because he reminded me exactly how strong the narrative writing was, and that Keith really does a great job of being informative and authoritative, but also being very kind of conversational. And I know, Rebecca, like, you just love the reference to Taylor Swift in the middle of a country music murder.
Very Swifty-ish.
Yeah, the writing here is actually really, really strong. For example, the signposting that goes on throughout was amazing. As far as when we get to something like that he's going to come back to, he tells you we're going to come back to that. It also doubles as sort of like this foreshadowing. You're like, oh, that must be really important.
I think the police had a difficult task because this crime happened inside the weird world of country music. They had to learn how songs are recorded, how money changes hands, how stars are made, and how dreamers are destroyed in Nashville. So let's do that. Let's talk about Nashville.
That's one of our complaints about some podcasts is that, like we don't remember who people are because it's been so long. It's like with the first 10 minutes in, I'm like, okay, this is going to be super strong. It just really starts off with all the quality, and then you move right along.
Yeah. I'm just going to say one thing. I may be the only person that this bothered. The quality of Keith's microphone throughout the podcast was varying so much. It really distracted from me from the narrative itself.
Hell, he was pickup lines done on a different microphone.
Well, also some of the long narrative passages, it sounded like he was on Zoom, and I think it was just filtered mic. And then the field tape microphones were so strong. And then there would be pickups in mid-sentence and mid-paragraph. It really, for me, like, I would just say, if I were going to give a note, just retrack the whole episode on a good microphone, get your best tracking, because the writing is so strong that you deserve to have really clean, great tracking throughout the whole episode. And I know it's a lot of work, but a lot of the tracking was muffled, it was filtered, and I just think that like the podcast is worth doing. So that is like my one big note for the whole thing, because the podcast deserves it. And I'm just not going to mention it again, but I just wanted to say it because I think listeners will hear it and wonder why I didn't say it if I don't. So I'm just going to say it right now. Laura, one thing I loved about this show, like granted, the Tennessean cannot get the music rights for all the songs in the show.
I know.
But they obviously got the guy who, one of the co-writers of Murder on Music Row, was able to play the song for Keith Sharon. And so therefore they were able to use his version of it in the show. So they use that over and over again, which is great because obviously the guy has the rights to, he owns the songwriter rights. He might not own the masters, but he owns the rights to play it. But he refers to so much music in the show that I found myself after every episode, like, I want to go listen to that Shania Twain song right now. I want to go listen to that song right now. Dude, I've listened to Blank Space by Taylor Swift like 500 times since episode 1 of this or episode 2 of this show. Did you find yourself like the pop culture references, like finding those to be like very, very helpful? Because he used them really well in the show.
Oh, absolutely. And I was like, I think I had a note where I was like, I suspect I'm the only one who probably knew most of the songs he referenced, unless the rest of you are secret country.
I didn't know most of them except for the Taylor Swift ones and the Shania Twain ones.
So like the first song they referenced, the Garth Brooks breakout song, Much Too Young, that is a song I sang at my birthday last year at the Exeter Dive Bar when I had a stand-in with my friend's band. So I won't sing it for you now because nobody really needed to hear it then. But it was like hearing like the time that things were happening. And like, I was like, I remember when that album came out. Oh, I remember when this person was coming into the scene. And there was actually somebody had posted in our discussion group sort of like an episode by episode playlist from this podcast.
That was Keith.
And I was like, I was kind of, was it? I didn't know. I didn't see who posted it.
I reached out to him and I was like, you know what would be a really good idea is a Spotify playlist for the podcast. And he's like, dummy, they exist. Like you obviously, and I was like, oh shit, I didn't know that. So yeah, so he went in and posted it.
Okay. But I was also like, oh, like as I was listening to it, I'd be like, oh, I wish they could play some of these songs. And then I'd go look them up online. And then I was looking up because I wasn't familiar with the songs that Sammy Sadler was like supposedly topping the charts with.
Nobody is. That's part of the point.
Nobody is. That's part of the thing. But the rest of them, I was just like,
you're not on the right chart, Laura. And again, that's the whole point.
I'm sorry, Cashbox is defunct now, but I just kind of like, I know when we did like Winds of Change and we've done other podcasts that have like this musical element to them. For me, I don't know about you guys, but you hear a song and it takes you back immediately to where you were in your life when that song came out.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'm in Vermont and Garth Brooks is like hitting it big. And I remember when everybody was listening to that first Garth Brooks album and now we're hearing about how that was unfolding while all this other stuff was happening. And Faith Hill is first on the scene of a murder.
Yeah. I have to wonder what year Sammy Sadler put out his album named 1989 and if he gets any accidental downloads of his album 1989.
Yeah.
Kevin, do you wonder why I'm asking that question?
Is that another Taylor Swift reference?
Yes, it's another Taylor Swift reference. Her very famous album 1989, which there are now 2 versions of because there's Taylor's version of 1989.
Well, I think Keith had a whole paragraph written about 1989 and the importance of 1989.
He did, absolutely. 1989, the class of 1989, of course, was extremely important.
Who was in the class of 1989?
Alan Jackson, and not the Alan Jackson from the Karen Reed trial, although I'm sure that's what Rebecca was thinking.
Mary Chapin Carpenter, Garth Brooks.
Garth Brooks, yeah.
There was the class of 1989 in Nashville. Like all these really famous people came up and hit in that year. So Toby, what did you think about like hearing like the intersection of all of these really famous people with this really obscure crime?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think as I was saying before, and you were saying like it's a small town industry where it just feels like there's like 1 degree of separation between everybody, right? And because a lot of these people, like I couldn't name a Reba McEntire song.
Yeah.
But when I heard Willie Nelson was on the street checking out the murder scene, I was like, okay, Willie Nelson, I do know.
The only time Willie Nelson and Chris Christopherson were B-roll.
I know.
It wasn't an
I know.
award
Chris
ceremony.
Christopherson. Yeah. I mean, those guys are legends, even for somebody who's not into country music like myself. So it's weird. I guess we'll probably talk about Sammy Sadler more fully later. But the whole Cashbox thing, this magazine that runs its own like top 100 hits, and how it's just like super corrupt. And, you know, if you buy ads in Cashbox, like that's going to help you get on there. There's part of the plot is that Kevin and Sammy are friends, and Sammy ends up on the charts and all this. And I made a little note about, could this have happened like in the 90s? Like once people like had databases and stuff they could share. And then a couple episodes later, it was like, oh, in 1992 SoundScan or something like that came out. And then suddenly when people had the actual data, it was like kind of shook things up.
But like how that one album came out twice. Is that what you're just saying?
Well,
that was interesting. Like it came out and then they're like, it came out again.
But then it was like, you know, like the day Kevin was killed, he cut these radio stations that seemed to be involved in some kind of like payola thing where they were being basically paid to play songs from evergreen records.
That's
that
right.
I guess
It was all scammy.
We're being demanded publicly, but we're just, you know,
or to just say that they did.
Right.
So that they can manipulate the chart. Actually, I remember being in radio. I remember R&R as an actual magazine and the charts in the back along with, you know, Billboard. That was the way that
Pay to play.
That was the way the charts were compiled, you know, and calling individual record stores. And so this ends up being kind of a great two-part scam. Like everybody's getting their beak wet on this, that you have the chart that's basically Cashbox here, where they're basically open to getting paid to place different artists and songs on their chart. And then you've got the music promoters who are definitely like, we'll do that because I'll get the money from this wannabe star and we'll just pass it right along and get them in there. So I definitely see, you know, the motive here. There, you know, nothing is, well, that's worth killing over, but I see the criminal logic to killing a guy who may be interfering with your lucrative grift because two very powerful people are making money off of this that he doesn't want to do it anymore. The owner of Cashbox and all these individual promoters that want to start buying stuff. So it's just like, and there are all these people, you know, who really feel like, oh, I want to break in the music business. They don't know any better. They feel like, oh, well, I need to get some kind of representation. It's an investment in myself. So they're just, you know, easily, you know, fleeced. It's just a really great scam. Unlike our Patreon, which is not a scam at all.
Not a scam.
Just for one low monthly payment, you can get all sorts of exclusive podcasts.
So much value.
So much value. Rebecca, do you have any idea how many podcast episodes we dropped in the month of June?
Oh, like 50?
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, this is exceptional. No, this is
40?
36 episodes.
Oh, okay. That's a lot.
Exclusive episodes.
Well,
a lot of those were driven by Rebecca.
A lot of them were me.
A lot of them were you. A lot of them were you because you were on your
I made a daily show, so it didn't hurt.
Yeah. So you can get all sorts of great things, like you can get episodes of Crime Writers on early and ad-free. You also get the Crime Writers on after show, and this week's after show, a couple of special things. Rebecca, you know, we were talking about like the music and like what a great playlist came from this podcast. Well, Rebecca wants to pick our brains and create a Spotify playlist for Crime Writers on.
From this podcast.
Oh. Like what song should be on that chart.
Oh.
Also, not only can you listen to the podcast, but we're going to do a little video so you can actually see what we all look like while we're doing the podcast. I think Toby says he's going to put a shirt on.
Hopefully.
Maybe not. That might make it much more exciting on Patreon.
Yeah, what's the payola amount to let him stay in that shirt? We can see the guns.
I'm hoping people join because I'm having a great hair moment today. Just saying.
Also, we've got Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcast. Now, on Thursday, Toby's going to be doing the live taping for this month's book. The book is The Brothers, The Road to an American Tragedy by Masha Gessen. Toby, you're looking forward to this one, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. I've got a great panel. Kate Tuttle, who is the books editor at the Boston Globe, Julie Millard, who teaches at Colby, and a person who's vying for most appearances on the Deep Dive, Sarah D. Bunting. So great panel. The book is super interesting. It's about the Tsarnaev brothers who did the Boston Marathon bombing. A lot about, you know, Chechnya and places like that after the wall fell. So yeah, it should be great.
Other podcasts that we have behind the paywall there at Patreon include Married with Podcast, our advice podcast. We have Laura Bricker's Leave It to Bricker podcast. What happens when Laura Bricker goes to the Renaissance Fair? You're just going to have to find out. And also, we have a new summer bonus here. It is Rebecca's game show podcast. It's called Other People's Problems. On this week's episode, I will be facing off with former Handsome Line producer Henry Lavoie, and we'll be talking about other people's problems.
That's right.
And just one other reminder that, as I said before...
Oh, wait, you forgot something.
What?
My continuing coverage of the Karen Reed case. That shit's not over.
That shit's not over. We're going to have a...
It's not daily. I can't promise daily anymore, but updates whenever I can.
Pretty soon, the closet in your basement is going to be...
Yes. There'll be a conference hearing later in
CF
the
McCarthy's.
month. Yeah. These Are the Stories returns with new episodes on Wednesday. Now, we have an Amazon storefront where you can see some of our favorite things. Rebecca, what are this week's CWO Amazon recommendations?
You know what I love buying on Amazon, Kevin?
What?
Taco Bell stuff. Taco Bell sauce, Taco Bell beans, and Taco Bell seasoning.
You can buy the sauce.
You can make your own Taco Bell shit at home. It's incredible.
And it comes in a jar or a whole bunch of packages.
I buy it in jars, like in a case of jars. It's incredible.
Fantastic. And Toby Ball, what are your listener-inspired Toby Ball's deep cut recommendations?
I'm going to start off. I don't advocate violence, but the WYOX Gel Premium hand wraps for boxing gloves, quick 80-centimeter wrist wraps, padded knuckle boxing wraps for men, women, Muay Thai, hand wraps, MMA, kickboxing.
In case you're a cut man.
In case you're Colin Albert. I bet he likes those. Yeah.
And then I have a sneaking suspicion I know who ordered this, but Van Camp's original baked beans, 15 ounces, in parentheses, 003814, end parentheses.
So many beans and Mexican food stuff this week. Remember, you can shop us first when you go to Amazon. Prime Day's coming up. Go start at amazon.com/shop/Crime Writers On. We earn commissions on qualified purchases.
All right, Kevin, before we wrap up the business section, I got to ask, do we have any Patreon patron saints of the week this week?
Our Patreon patron saints are Julia Garcia and Amy Mason. Bless you.
All right, bless you guys. Bless you for being our Patreon patron saints. Bless you to everybody who's just joined us on Patreon. Like a couple hundred of you, brand new patrons. We really appreciate you coming and joining us behind the paywall. Tell us what you love about it. Tell us what we can do for you back there. And I hope you like it. And if you haven't joined yet and you're thinking about it, give it a try. You might like it. All right, Kevin, should we go ahead and fade that music out right now?
Yeah, thus ends the business section.
Thus ends the business section. Let's get that done. Kevin, who's our next wonderful sponsor for this podcast?
We're brought to you by Quince.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, whenever you're gearing up for your next trip, deciding what to pack is always so stressful, and the clothes that you have either don't fit or they're worn out and they just don't match, and you need to be refreshed because when you go on vacation, you want to feel great, so say hello to Quince.
Seriously, say hello to Quince.
Your new go-to for high-quality vacation essentials that you'll be packing for trips to come. Rebecca, you actually just surprised me with a nice seasonal accoutrement.
Kevin, the linen stuff at Quince is incredible.
Yeah.
I've bought myself a couple of linen shirts, like the camp style linen shirts, and I tie them at the waist and wear them all the time. We were just on a car trip and I was like, Kevin, I wear this black one all the time. I think I should get another one in a different color. Did it right then, and I ordered one for you, and you love it, do you not?
I do. I love my linen jacket that you purchased for me, so I look like I should go on a yacht. I don't know anybody with a yacht, but I really want to go on a yacht just so that I can wear that. Yeah, all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes.
Pack your bags with high-quality essentials with Quince. Go to quince.com/crime for free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com. That's QUINCE.com/crime. Get free shipping and 365-day-a-year returns. Quince.com/crime.
Crime.
So, Kevin, who's our next sponsor for this program?
We're brought to you by Shopify.
Ooh.
So, Rebecca, okay, so I don't think I've ever asked you this. So we'll do a quick podcast crossover. Rebecca, who is your favorite Law and Order detective team?
Favorite Law and Order detective team?
Briscoe and Green.
Yeah, I would also go, I'd go Briscoe and Curtis.
Ooh.
Yeah, because they are partners who get things done, right? They're able to solve the case, except, of course, the time when they arrest the wrong guy and it's McCoy who's got to bail him out. That's a whole other problem with the justice system, but we'll get to that later. We've got great partners, though, with you and Shopify. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business, from the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to did we just hit 1 million order stage?
Of the two of us, I am the online shopper, yes or no?
You are.
Shopify, I know the interface. As a shopper, super easy to use. If you are selling stuff online, get Shopify. It's just like a click and you are out of there.
Nothing worse than like putting something in the cart to check out, and it's a whole technical mess.
Gotta
and you just
go
walk
get
away.
my wallet. Gotta go. No, Shopify, man. Shopify.
You lose that sale. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/crime writers.
Crime writers.
All lowercase. Go to shopify.com/crime writers.
Crime writers.
Now, to grow your business no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/crime
writers.
Robert Pickton, one of the worst serial killers.
A new true crime series from Freeform.
A lot of victims are people who are in the margins.
When all else fails,
There's possibly many more victims.
Nobody cared.
Sasha Reed and her team take the case.
We're coming for you.
I just want answers. We're going to do absolutely everything to get closure to these cases.
The whole thing is a cover-up.
There's so much more here.
Sasha Reed and the Midnight Order premieres July 9th on Freeform and stream on
We're
Hulu.
coming for you.
All right, so Toby, Cashbox, quite the throwback, huh? Like, you could just, I don't know, bring your daughter to Nashville and make her a star.
Yeah, so you get a bit of this. You also get this from, I think, Sammy Sadler, too. Especially if you have a little bit of money. Your parents, throw you in the back of the station wagon, go to Nashville, and then there's all these sharks who are waiting to take your money to produce a record or do PR for you or whatever. And then some of that Cashbox sort of plays into that whole sort of scam environment by allowing relationships with particular record producers or PR people who funnel money their way. They put them on these fake charts that they have so that people look like, they're doing well. So with Sammy Sadler, I think one of his songs debuted at number 77 on the charts. Like right across from it was a little ad that said, "Congratulations, Sammy Sadler, you're number 77, love Evergreen Records." And then he had to put out another one that started off at 72 in the charts, but it was the same ad because it said, "Congratulations, you're number 77, even though he's number 72, but with a different song.
It reminded me of yearbooks, like when your parents used to buy ads in the back and be like, Rebecca, you made it.
Again, like Rebecca said, it's small town stuff. I mean, it's just, even though it's country music mecca and the chart includes all these big names and stuff. I think at one point they're talking about the people who he's above in the chart is like Alan Jackson, people I'm aware of.
Clint Black.
But it's just totally bogus,
yeah.
right? I mean,
he's one position ahead of Dwight Yoakam.
Yeah, exactly. But, and I think there's, Keith brings it up a few times. I think he's talking to a guy who's at one of the bigger legit record companies and sort of talks to him a little bit or asks him about like all these people who showed up to Nashville with big dreams and just were sent away, like fleeced of all their money.
Holly knew Chuck was so preposterously fraudulent. When he called her on the phone, she would sing.
Chuck Dixon, won't you lie to me? How did I know the foreshadowing that was involved in that?
There's a dark side to it, and it's not the usual dark side of stardom. It's like the dark side of not getting to stardom.
Yeah.
And basically just these predatory jerks, and some of them are either with Cashbox or are sort of Cashbox adjacent or formerly of Cashbox.
Right.
And that kind of plays into some of the investigation later.
I'll tell you, one of the things I freaking loved about this podcast, and it's sort of woven in and out of these stories, is when you get to hear from these music managers and music creators and like producer types who talk about people they passed on. Yeah.
Oops. Yes,
freaking
that was
awesome.
hilarious.
When the dude's like, he passed on Dwight Yoakam because he sings too much out of his nose. All the people who passed on Garth Brooks. And it's like, and they talk about how transformative Garth Brooks was and how when SoundScan was developed, that's where they realized how well country music was selling. I loved the scene, how when they talk about how Mutt Lange transformed how music was recorded in Nashville, like that inside baseball industry stuff was fascinating. But like, how many times people just saying no to people who then ended up becoming like incredibly famous? The fact that Faith Hill worked for, like you said, worked for Reba McEntire, but then was also like backup singer to this person and then this person and then this person, and that person failed and then she finally gets discovered. By the way, it does seem like you have to like marry somebody in Nashville in order to like become, because Shania Twain ended up marrying Mutt Lange, Faith Hill ended up marrying Tim McGraw. It seems like you got to be part of a power couple to get shit done. That's just my observation.
Well, somebody says like right out, it's like people say it's not what you know, it's who you know, and that's like 100% Nashville.
It's like who you marry.
Yeah.
So Laura, Sammy Sadler.
Yeah.
Keith got a lot of tape of him, and from the beginning, that dude is pretty fucking sus. Yes or no?
Well, so in the beginning, we hear like, he's upset. He's like being fingered as being involved in this.
He got shot.
I'm feeling a little sympathy. And then I found out he like wrote this book that he totally contradicts all these statements he made to the police in the book. When they ask him about statements he's made in the book, he's like, oh, I didn't say that. And you're like, no, actually you wrote this in your book. So you hear about it in the beginning. You're like, okay, he's there. You think he's like a victim as well. They follow the blood and they find him in an apartment hiding under a table. He had been the passenger in the car. He's all like, oh, shucks, golly gee willikers. And you think, oh, he's nice. The first mistake he makes, he describes the shooter as black and thin, and everyone else is like, he was white and chubby. Mm-hmm. That was a little suspect. Yeah. And then in his book, he's like, when I got home, my wife and I got into an argument. It's one of those disagreements, blah, blah, blah. And then the book includes the argument story. But when he talks to the police, he never mentions the argument. So there's a lot of things about Sammy Sadler that are a little suspect. Like also, oh, we're going to go here and like call my parents so I can charge it to Evergreen Records because at this time, we have to pay long distance.
But there's no record of that phone call on that phone line.
Yeah. At first I was trying to feel sympathy for him. And then I was like, yeah, no.
Yeah. Kevin, what do you think about Sammy Sadler and his susness?
Absolutely. I think that Keith Sharon does a good job of letting us suspect Sammy is hiding something without accusing him. Basically, he's drawn the line in pencil and then given us a pen and just left it right there on the table and walked out of the room and let us decide for ourselves. It does make you wonder why Sammy's never been examined more thoroughly than he has. I mean,
you know what the best is, Kevin?
What?
When he's like the year after the shooting, he had a great year, and he's like, he had a terror. He's like, my career was ruined. And he's like, no, he had a great year. And there's literally the thing in the magazine that says Sammy Sadler had a great year. It was fucking hysterical.
Well, I mean, when you get a little paid off in one way or the other for your assistance, and maybe
your charge is double.
Luring someone to their death. I mean, certainly Keith Sharon has a lot of different documents and has done the research on what this guy has said, and so you finally get to talk to him, and so then there's a little bit of pushback or pressing him on certain details. But you also have to realize that when you look at it, what just happened to Sammy? Well, Kevin was about to drop his ass off the charts. Apparently, everybody pays to get on Cashbox except for Sammy, right, Sammy? Not your rich dad. The only thing I think is perhaps maybe the rich dad did it and didn't tell him, but I'm not really, his complete lack of curiosity
paid for
in that.
Other people, but not him.
There you go. That's what it was. Wink, wink. But as someone pointed out, it's clear Kevin was killed execution style because when he got out of the car and ran away, the shooter went after him. He didn't stick around to finish off Sammy. He went after Kevin, shot him in the head.
Shot his fingers off because of the way that he had his fingers around his head.
Yeah. Not to say that both can't be killed, but Kevin is definitely the target here. How does anybody know Kevin is going to be there?
Right.
Where Sammy works.
Right.
That part just doesn't add up. And so it certainly seems like people in the past have tried to advance this theory that Sammy played a larger role than just being in the passenger seat when the shooting went down. He certainly seemed to be sort of directing where they were going all over town and when they had to be there. he's the only guy who sees a black guy, where everybody else saw a chubby white guy who ran like a duck.
Right.
Right?
With a board up his ass.
Yeah. And again, like I said, Sharon doesn't like really press him Mike Wallace style and start yelling at him, but he certainly draws out enough where you're like, I'm not buying this guy's story. And how come it is that like all these years later, it's just, oh, they ruined my life. Well, maybe it's because you had something to do with it.
Maybe you shouldn't work at Cashbox Magazine. Like, how many other people that worked there died? Like, they had the one guy who died in a car accident, and then the other lady that was like, somebody said to her, like, don't be surprised if your car blows up in your face. Like, I don't think I'd be taking that job.
I don't know if I'd be reporting this story. I mean, it's like when the first episode, Keith Sharon's like, I had to like meet somebody in a bar after having them verify, after handing me a note, like getting the text that from a burner phone, like who I thought it was. And then they handed me a note.
And they wrote a name on a piece of paper of who you thought it was. And they went to the restaurant and it wasn't that person, but they agreed to talk. I was like, this is so exciting.
Yeah, that Cloak and Dagger stuff was amazing. It totally drew me in.
One day, I was asked by an anonymous text from an untraceable burner account to write down the name of the person I thought was texting me. I was told to place that name in an envelope and drive more than 40 miles to an eatery where I had never been. In the restaurant bar, I was approached by a person who I had never met, and they asked me for the envelope. I pulled it out of the pocket of my sport coat. They opened it, hesitated, then told me their name. My guess was wrong, but by following directions, I had secured a barroom interview with someone who provided key off-the-record information.
I mean, like, if there's a nit to pick, did we really get a payoff from that? I mean, I guess we know that there were fruits of the labor, but we didn't quite get, was there a Mr. X? Because everybody's afraid of talking about. I mean, there are inferences that...
Well, it would have been nice if he said, I got this tip from that person at the bar. I mean, because he did get tips.
I would kind of like to wrap up the...
Yeah, I would love to hear that he got tips, because we know we heard that he got tips. I would love to have heard in the podcast, like, I found out about these people from that tipster that I met at the bar that I told you about.
Yeah, because when I heard that, I went over to the cabinet and I pulled out the Orville Redenbacher, put it in the microwave, because I'm like, popcorn time, bitches.
So, Laura, I know that, the podcast isn't completely out yet, so I don't want to spoil it too much, but there is a Sting-ish situation near the end. Can you not verify that is just like an incredibly great cinematic way of bringing somebody down, the way that these people decided to send somebody in and trap somebody in a situation?
Well, that was vague, Rebecca. I mean, let's just say that I think what that showed was just how corrupt the system was, that they sent in somebody, I think we should just spoil it. They sent in somebody who basically is a horrible performer and has been told to ham up and play up being a horrible performer.
That's right. Just fast forward if you don't want to be spoiled.
And they are then like, you have the voice of an angel, or we're going to like make you big, and you've arrived. And you're like, no, actually, no.
The post office is the one that helped us do that, because he was using the mail, which is a federal crime, but it's also a state crime.
Another reason they picked Myra is because she couldn't sing a lick. She sounded like an injured bird, and that's probably too generous. Her job was to expose the fraud that was happening with this one independent producer.
After everything we've heard about these like predatory promoters, this just really solidified that when you hear the way that they laid this out and set this up.
Right.
With chocolate treats mixed into dark chocolate ice cream, the Tillamook Chocolate Collection is a chocolate game changer. Because the thing that pairs best with chocolate is more chocolate. Tillamook Chocolate Collection Ice Cream. Extraordinary dairy.
For 25 years, nothing has tasted better after a hard day's work than a Mike's Hard Lemonade. It's because since day one, Mike's has been making lemonade the hard way. We use 3 kinds of lemons, all hand-picked from family farms, then blended to perfection and cold-pressed to create the epic hard lemonade you know and love. Mike's Hard Lemonade. Hard days deserve a hard lemonade. Mike's is hard, so is prison. Don't drive drunk. Premium malt beverage with flavors. All registered trademarks used under license by Mike's Hard Lemonade Company, Chicago, Illinois.
Eddie Murphy is back as Axel Foley in Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F. He's rejoined by familiar faces like Judge Reinhold and John Ashton. as Rosewood and Taggart, along with new characters and new hijinks.
I didn't realize that you couldn't really fly helicopters.
Watch Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F. now, only on Netflix. Rated R.
Robert Picton, one of the worst serial killers.
A new true crime series from Freeform.
A lot of victims are people who are in the margins.
When all else fails,
There's possibly many more victims.
Nobody cares.
Sasha Reed and her team take the case.
We're coming for you.
I just want answers. We're going to do absolutely everything to get closure to these cases.
The whole thing is a cover-up.
There's so much more here.
Sasha Reed and the Midnight Order premieres July 9th on Freeform and stream on
We're
Hulu.
coming for you.
All right, let's do what we do. Let's let our listeners know, should they check out Murder on Music Row from the Tennessean? Laura Bricker, what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down for this podcast?
Yeah, I'm going thumbs up. Like, I think in this group, I'm probably the only person who listens to country music. So I immediately could relate to this, but also Nashville, where we went on one of our podcast trips. I enjoyed the aspect of this that kind of combined a city and the culture of the city and the culture of the music industry with this murder. But also, there was so many interesting voices in it. There was some cloak and dagger moments. There were some moments where you're like, ooh, can't believe that happened. And, you know, I think in the end, it was pretty granular. There were times where I was like, this is super detailed. And I would kind of gloss over some of the details. But that didn't matter, because if you really wanted to get it down to that level of what was happening, you could follow along. Or you could just kind of be like, okay, I'm enjoying the story and I'm along for the ride. But overall, it was really unique. And I think it was a really interesting retelling and telling new details of this crime all these years later from somebody that's on the ground in Tennessee, who has the sourcing, who could have been in some seriously dangerous situations, which I thought was like, well, this is exciting. You know, Keith, I'm glad you're alive, and thumbs up.
So far.
So far. And if Keith gets murdered, it's going to be only murders in Nashville, and the four of us are going.
That's right. Toby Ball, what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down for Murder on Music Row?
So I'll first say that Keith has been on the deep dive a few times.
And that has not influenced your review, right, Toby?
It has not influenced my review, although I like Keith a lot. I thought this was a great podcast. I agree with the stuff that Laura said. There's the actual sort of murder case that's sort of the center of it. And that's, he does a great job of covering that and doing all the journalism there. Setting the scene in Nashville in like the sort of mid to late 80s, when it was sort of undergoing this sort of change from sort of old country music to the Garth Brooks era. And it seemed like things were like still on sort of back of the napkin type things right before, you know, things like the charts got professionalized and things like that. So great scene setting, great stuff about an interesting case. There's some funny parts. There's some disturbing parts. But what I think really sort of sets this apart from a lot of other good podcasts is the writing of the voiceover, the narration is just really, really strong. And the tone of it, I think, is just perfect for this story. It makes it sound kind of unique. And I just loved every second of it. I'm sure it'll be way up in my top 10 at the end of the year. So it's a huge thumbs up for me. I hope people listen.
Kevin Flynn.
Yeah, I'm also an enthusiastic thumbs up. This really was a great podcast. I knew like 5 minutes in just how strong it was. The writing was great. It's way better than I thought it would be when it was going to be about country music and murder. And I will tell you that, quite honestly, as someone who's not a country music fan, I was thinking like this little side trip into the song Murder on Music Row that I was just going to groan and roll my eyes. That part was really super interesting. I think that's to the strength of Keith Sharon's ability to tell a story. The whole look at the underbelly of promotions in country music, that was very intriguing. You don't have to be a country music fan, but I found like whenever they dabbled into sort of the history of what was happening in Nashville, I was pulled in. But like this really gets going when Keith talks to the witness to the murder and all the things that kind of implies and that he brings up. I will say that I'm going to give this a thumbs up, but I will say to Keith Sharon, if he would like to buy an ad and slide a little extra money under the table, we can push this up a little higher on our charts. My top 10. I think you could make my top 10 with just a small ad
Congratulations, Keith Sharon. You're Kevin's number 8.
Right. And then in 2025, it's like, you're number 7. So again, an enthusiastic thumbs up.
Yeah, I'm a thumbs up too. I just want to reiterate, I do have an issue with the audio quality of the tracking of this podcast. And again, I'm saying it because listeners will give me shit if I don't say it, because it is true. The tracking of this podcast was uneven and it should have been redone from start to finish with a high quality mic, because we hear the high quality mic sometimes in this podcast, but not all the time in this podcast. That being said, the podcast has a fantastic sense of place. It's incredibly detailed. It's incredibly fun. It's got great pop culture references. Keith Sharon's a Swiftie, and that comes through, and I love it. And it's so funny because I heard a couple people say, like, including you, Kevin, I'm not a fan of country music. I think when people, like, and I'm not saying this is what you're saying, Kevin, but when people say I'm not a fan of X music, very often what they mean is I'm not a fan of the culture around X music.
No, that's not what I mean.
I understand that. I understand that. But country music
Best part is there actually isn't any country music.
Listen, I understand that. Country music is music, though, right? And very often what I found myself doing and like listening to this thing is you come to appreciate a genre when you like learn about how it's built. And I found myself listening to Keith's Spotify playlist and like, really kind of understanding. Like, I love Trisha Yearwood, for instance. I don't consider myself a country music aficionado or fan, but I always loved Trisha Yearwood's voice. So like there are some Trisha Yearwood songs that are on my Spotify playlist because I just fucking love her voice so much. And like, it's music. And I think that when you learn about how music is built, how it's made, you hear where it's from, you hear about the people who are behind it, like you can get with it in a way that even if you don't listen to it all the time, like it means something new to you. And I think that Keith does a very good job of conveying that in this podcast. And, he even does it with Taylor Swift when he talks about the bridge in Blank Space, which is just really well done. He does it really well when he talks about Dwight Yoakam and his like nasally voice. Anyway, I just really love the podcast. I think it's just lovely. And for a murder podcast, it's historic murder, so it feels less, in your face, bloody, present, and more like a historic story, more of a sweeping story. And it kind of resonates today, too, with sort of the industry rot stuff. So, yeah, it's very good. Thumbs up for me for this podcast for sure. Now it's time for my favorite part of the podcast, a little something I like to call the Crime of the Week. We've all been there. That time you sneeze so hard that a little pee comes out. Well, a 63-year-old Florida man sneezed so hard that his intestines came out. Nope, they didn't come out where you think they did. The American Journal of Medicine reports that the unnamed patient had recently completed one of several surgeries related to his prostate cancer, which left him with a fresh scar in his abdomen. During breakfast at a diner with his wife, the man let out a big achoo, then felt something wet in his lap. The Journal said he observed several loops of pink bowel protruding from his recent surgical site. He did what most diners would do. He just covered it with his napkin. EMTs packed the protuberance and got him to the hospital. Other than looking like an extra in the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan, the man was uninjured, and surgeons were able to stuff his eviscerated bowel back into his abdomen. Researchers say the incident helped educate them on something rarely studied: the bursting of wounds associated with that kind of prostate surgery. They now have more information they can use next allergy season. So panel, we think this restaurant is missing out on a great marketing campaign. What should they do to take advantage of a customer sneezing his guts out? Laura Bricker?
DIY sausage making. It's like when you grill what you catch when you go to a fish restaurant.
Tell me, Bob, what do you think this restaurant should do to take advantage of this customer sneezing his guts out?
I was going to say something about sausage links, but she took it from me.
Who needs Ozempic when you can cough your intestines out?
Exactly.
What do you think, Kevin Flynn?
Oh, they got a great pairing here. It's the Gutbuster sandwich with the bowel of soup.
All right, that's going to do it for us. But before we go, Laura Bricker, do we have a cat of the week this week?
We do have a cat of the week this week. So this one comes to us from one of our listeners, Andy. Andy has a submission. Pearl is a beloved, hyper-intelligent 2-year-old house cat known for loving couch time between Dad and Achoo Dad, watching Star Trek, and for hating when they play cards instead of doting upon her. Adorable pics to follow. So this is not a cat that is going to bite your hand and have your hand amputated, but this cat was laying on top of, I'm not sure what game they're playing, but in the middle of the cards, the cat is just like, yeah, no, fuck you. The cat is here. So I appreciated that. And also the Achoo picture is really cute too, because the cat is like,
oh, got the open mouth. Yeah.
Achoo. 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 So Andy, thanks for sending in your cat.
All right, Laura Bricker, if folks want to reach out to you and send in their cats, of course, they can email us at crimeraiderzone@gmail.com. But how else can you be found?
You can find me at Laura Bricker on Twitter and Instagram.
Toby Ball, folks want to see you online, maybe see a picture of the lake you may have posted online. How can they find you?
At Toby Ball NH.
What about you, Kevin Flynn? Are you anywhere online?
I'm at Kevin P. Flynn.
You can follow me everywhere. See pictures of my newly redressed Barbies and everything on Twitter, Instagram, everywhere else at Reb Lavoie. You can also follow the show everywhere at Crime Writers On, and I encourage you strenuously to join our incredible group on Facebook. Just find us on Facebook. There's a link to join the group. Get episodes early, ad-free, and all the other shit we make, including Karen Reed updates, Toby's Book Club, all of it at our Patreon, patreon.com/partners in crime media. Our theme song was composed and performed by Ty Gibbons. Our editor is the terrific Livy Burdett. The executive producer of this show is Kevin Flynn. This show was recorded in Studio C, The Closet, in our New Hampshire basement, where our parents also pay big money to get us on the chats. On behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We'll catch you later. Mom, get us back on the charts, Mom. Do it.
Can you give me just a second for a level check?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's better.
Toby, I like that you're holding your microphone like you're on like
a talk
Casey
show.
Kasem Top 40.
Yeah, I forgot to bring the mic stand that I use for my backup system. So
it's gonna be incredible audio. I can tell.
In crime media.
Hello, I'm Johnny Knoxville.
And I'm Elna Baker, and we have a new podcast. It's called Pretty Sure I Can Fly.
Yep, we've teamed up with my friends and barmates from Smartless to create a podcast where we talk to folks who have more balls in a bowling alley.
People who accomplish something extraordinary despite people telling them that it couldn't or shouldn't be done.
You'll hear stories about the Air Force doctor who buckled into a 600-mile-per-hour rocket sled and became the fastest man on the planet.
And a man who wrestles alligators and sharks for fun.
Do not do this. You'll hear about a foul-mouthed moonshiner.
Got a 2-inch dick and a 6-inch tongue and knows how to use both of them.
And an even more foul-mouthed female stunt pilot. We got bull riders,
balloonists,
bobsledders,
and big wave surfers. People who lay their balls on an anvil and hand the other fella the hammer.
Okay. I bet you've actually done that, Johnny.
Maybe for sweeps. Follow Pretty Sure I Can Fly on the Wondery app.
Or wherever you get your podcasts.
You can listen to Pretty Sure I Can Fly early and ad-free right now on Wondery Plus.